Micro is a huge part of Age of Empires 2. The art of moving around, dipping and dodging until it's your time to strike back is a fundamental part of taking engagements with early game armies. For the longest time, it was understood that until Ballistics kicks in, you basically had a free pass to dodge all of your opponent's projectiles, unless they were extremely close to you or unless you just stood still and tanked their shots. The idea was, as long as you're moving away from your opponent's army as they're taking the shot, they're going to miss all of their arrows and you're going to walk away unscathed. You take literally 0 damage. This form of mechanical play is what we call micro, and it's basically the way to express your skill when it comes to taking fights. Listen, Age of Empires 2 is ultimately a strategy game. Going for the right strategy and playing towards your strength is going to win you most games. However, when it comes time to take an engagement and it's 10 archers versus 10 archers, strategy goes completely out the window because you guys have the exact same army on the field. At that point, it comes down to raw mechanical skill and who can outplay their opponents and dodge their projectiles while landing their own. That's the game, and that's how it is until Ballistics kicks in. Ballistics is a tech from the university and it's available in the Castle Age with a cost of 300 wood and 175 gold. To put this in perspective, it costs more than a town center as far as raw resources, and in Castle Age, a university is not very useful aside of getting this tech, so it's quite a big investment to go for Ballistics early on in the game. However, the idea was that when Ballistics kicks in, the dodging game is over. Both players simply have to just stand still and trade until the player with a stronger army will win. There's no point to move around much because dodging projectiles when Ballistics is in play is impossible, right? So why would you move around? You just stand still and shoot at your opponent, they'll shoot back at you, and that's the way the game's played. When Ballistics kicks in, we stand still and we fight. Well, that sounds lovely. However, this completely changed when pro players discovered a way to actively dodge projectiles when Ballistics is in play, completely going against the definition of Ballistics, which states that projectiles will always hit moving targets. We feel lied to, but let's take a look at the history to understand how this even came to be. Dodging Ballistics was invented by a player named Leary back in 2016. For those who don't know, Leary's still active and playing at the moment in top tier play, and he's easily considered a top 3 player currently. Back in 2016, when he discovered this mechanic, it was brand new and he really shocked the audience because nobody could expect a player to dodge projectiles when Ballistics kicks in. That went completely against the way the game was played for many years. The way dodging Ballistics works is by abusing how Ballistics works as a game mechanic. Ballistics as a technology basically makes it so your archer will shoot in the general path and the general direction of where the enemy unit is headed. So it calculates the position of your enemy in his trajectory as the shot is released. However, if the enemy unit will change its direction after the shot is released, the shot will go to where the enemy was supposed to be, but since he moved direction, he won't be there, making Ballistics miss. Obviously, what I just described happens in the span of 2 seconds, so it looks a lot faster than this explanation makes it out to be, but that's the general concept. All you have to do is move after your opponent took the shot and you'll be able to dodge his projectile even after he gets Ballistics. This is basically the opposite of how it works without Ballistics. In that case, you do not want to change the direction because doing so means walking back into the arrow, which means taking damage. When there's no Ballistics in play, you walk straight. When there's Ballistics in play, you walk straight and then turn back as soon as he shoots. Pretty simple, but it's a lot harder to do and it's a lot easier to understand how it works than to do it consistently in a game. That being said though, it's also not the hardest trick in the book. And back in 2016, it was basically just Leary and a couple other pro players that got the hang of it. Nowadays, it's been practiced and perfected to the point that most top 100 players are able to consistently pull it off. Even your hardcore fan or viewer understands the mechanics behind it and can probably pull it off a good chunk of the time in game as well. Now, the obvious question is, if dodging Ballistics is so widespread, why do people even bother getting the technology? You might think that most pro players would opt to skip the tech altogether because 475 resources plus needing a university is a pretty significant investment for such little value that you're getting from the tech. Weirdly enough though, this isn't the case at all. Pro players are still prioritizing Ballistics when going for range unit compositions, and it is still an extremely important technology despite the strong counterplay. I've done some deep thinking and I've come up with a few reasons why that's the case, because to me it's such a mystery that when such strong counterplay exists, the tech would still have such high value for not just me, but a lot of other pro players as well. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of the reasons I've come up with to see how Ballistics is still worthwhile and still worth the investment, despite pro players being able to counter it effectively. So the first point that's worth mentioning is that even though pro players know how to dodge Ballistics, it's still a lot harder to dodge Ballistics than to dodge when there's no Ballistics in play. Let me explain why. This has nothing to do with actual skill, by the way. If you're the best Ballistics dodger in town and you never get hit by a single projectile when your opponent has Ballistics, it doesn't matter because you're limited by the mechanic behind it. You see, to dodge Ballistics, you have to be focused, razor focused on your army. You can't look away because it involves clicking back and forth. It's very precise timings. So you can't just click once and look away for 10 seconds like you can when there's no Ballistics in play, right? Your opponent is walking around, he's trying to attack you, you just walk away from him diagonally and he can never hit you. That's the life when there's no Ballistics. When Ballistics kicks in, if you're walking away diagonally and he's still within range to shoot, you're gonna have to be able to walk the other way, get out of your trajectory to dodge his shot. And you have to do that every single time he shoots, or else you're gonna get hit. So as I mentioned, even if you're the best Ballistics dodger in town, you still have to be razor focused on your army to be able to effectively perform that micro. This is a really big deal because you see, Age of Empires 2, unlike League of Legends, for example, where it's just one character and it all comes down to these micromanagement engagements and all these little timings to gain advantage, here the army and the fighting matters. However, there's a whole other part of the game, what we call macro management, which is managing literally everything else going on at the same time while the fight is happening. You see, you're gonna have a dozen vills back home that need maintenance. You need to make sure they're always working, they're not bumping into each other, they're not going idle and just being lazy. You have to make sure your town centers are producing more villagers to keep your economy expanding. You have to make sure that you're making more military so that when your army eventually dies, you can replace it and not get steamrolled by your opponent's production. All of these things are always happening and you have to be able to do those things, and you can't when you're microing against Ballistics. And so a huge part of Ballistics in modern gameplay is just to make sure your opponent has to spend more time microing. You can't dodge Ballistics if you're not looking at your army. So if you get Ballistics and then your opponent is doing his thing, dodging Ballistics and dodging all your shots, before getting frustrated, just remember, hey, he is spending all of his time and energy on dodging my shots. If he doesn't have Ballistics as well, I can easily micro and just move around every 5 to 10 seconds. And then in that 5 to 10 second window, I just go back, fix my production, fix a few idle villagers, set up, some economy, and then go back to my army. I've got a much better flow of the game and my opponent is razor focused on just dodging back and forth. So I gain a huge practical edge over my opponent in what I'm able to do in that spare time. The second point that's worth mentioning is that running away from combat also requires a few additional clicks to dodge all of those last projectiles, which takes up even more time, but this is a secondary point that's definitely worth mentioning. Now you really have to pick your fights. You see, when there's no Ballistics in play, you can just take a fight. If it's bad, just run away. And as you're running away, there's basically no chance your opponent can attack your army because you're going to be a good enough distance away. He might get one last shot off, but as soon as the gap, increases between your army and his, no matter how many times he shoots or tries to chase you, you're always going to be far enough away to the point where he can't hit you as long as you keep moving. When Ballistics comes into the game, this is different. If you run away and he's still within range, he can get 1, 2, maybe even 3 more shots before you leave the range where he can hit you from. And if you don't actively dodge Ballistics on the way out, you're going to take some losses. Now, it is worth mentioning that there is a way to dodge Ballistics on the way out when you're leaving a fight, and it requires using the formations this time. You can go ahead and split your army and then go back into the line formation and do that really fast to change the trajectory of your entire army as you're running away multiple times really quickly. This makes it so any projectile coming your way will be completely screwed off in terms of its pathing recognition, because it thinks you're moving one way with your army and then real quick you're going to be moving the other way, but the shot is already off and it's going to be flying into the horizon and completely missing your army. Yet again though, this technique requires all of your attention, so running away has the same problem as fighting, in a sense that it takes up all of your attention and you need to be focused on only that. The third point worth mentioning here when it comes to why Ballistics is actually worth getting is that killing villagers over wood lines and walls is so much easier with Ballistics. Dodging Ballistics with a group of villagers is much harder to do because you don't have formations when it comes to villagers. Remember how I said that with an army you can just use that split and then that line formation really quickly to dodge Ballistics? With a group of 10 to 15 vills, you can't do that. Villagers do not get access to army formations, and so when it comes to a raid at your wood line, you have to just run your villagers manually. The most you can do is walk a group with them back and forth manually, but honestly, this is not the most effective solution, and chances are if your opponent has 10 to 15 or more crossbows or cav archers or anything ranged, he's gonna land some shots, and it's not an effective way to counter that with your villagers, so you'll end up taking a lot more damage if your opponent has ballistics. If he doesn't have ballistics, you'll lose 1-2 vills. As soon as you notice you run away, as soon as you start running away, no more vills will die, and you're gonna be good to go. When ballistics kicks in, there's gonna be another like 3 to 4 tiles where your villagers are in danger, and you could end up losing another 3 or 4 villagers in that space. So it's a pretty significant advantage when it comes to raiding if you have ballistics versus when you don't have it. The fourth reason in favor of ballistics, and I've said that word like 1,000 times this video, but bear with me, it scales really well. See, you can dodge ballistics easily in early Castle Age, but the more army there is on the field, the harder the micro becomes. And when it comes to the point of like 50-60 army on the field in Imp, there's castles and towers everywhere, it's really hard to dodge ballistics. So it just scales incredibly well into the late game. The more army there's in the field, the less dodging ballistics will be happening, and so the more value it gets. If you for some reason don't have ballistics in late game, which can happen in pro games, players have forgotten it in the past, it's an absolute disaster because you're going to be missing so many of your shots, because in late game, units are moving around all over the place. And if there's no ballistics in, as long as the unit is moving, you're not going to be hitting him with anything. And the best part is your opponent does not have to micro against that. He just has to move. He clicks one command to attack in a certain direction, and you cannot hit him unless you're really close to his army. So if you don't have ballistics in late game, you're going to be hitting pretty much nothing. It's absolute disaster. So ballistics is a tech that scales really well, and so picking it up early lets you maximize that value. And the fifth and last reason in favor of ballistics here is that ballistics applies to literally everything. Every ranged unit in the game except siege, unless scorpions in the last patch, or in a recent patch, scorpions now benefit from this tech. But aside from units, also defensive structures, town centers, towers, castles, bomber towers, any defensive structure you can think of is affected by ballistics. And so the value you get out of this tech over the course of the game is absolutely insane. It's such a versatile technology. It applies to everything. Even if you're not playing range units, it's still worth picking it up. And so therefore, it's always going to be a value buy, and chances are you'll get your money back if you invest into it early. So in conclusion, ballistics is not as good as it once was, that's for sure. However, it's still incredibly important to pick it up as soon as possible if you're on range units. In fact, a pro tip that I give most of my coaching clients is to just pick up ballistics before adding in any town centers. This gives you the maximum value off of the tech, and it makes taking fights for you as easy as possible and as hard as possible for your opponent. That is literally the best case scenario when it comes to taking engagements. It's so easy for you to fight, and it's so hard for your opponent to fight. Even if your opponent is a strong and competent player and he's dodging your ballistics, just know in the back of your mind that you have a lot more time to take care of other stuff that needs to be taken care of, and you can focus your energy on a wide variety of things, whereas your opponent is going to be locked in and tunnel visioned on just moving back and forth and dodging those projectiles. What's crazy to me though is how this dodging ballistics micro could have easily broken the game. It could have made the tech completely obsolete, but instead it just made it so players had to reevaluate the situation, reevaluate the cost benefit, and completely adapt to a new set of circumstances. And to this day, it's still a really good balance for pro play. You can get ballistics early and get the multitude of benefits, or you can decide to delay it a little bit in favor of adding in a town center or two, or adding in some siege workshop units and valuing your resources elsewhere, which is a viable option. Ballistics went from being a must to being a choice that you have to go for. And I would say that the balance right now for ballistics is much better than it's ever been. The tech used to be something that you had to get. It's a no-brainer. Nowadays, it's still incredibly valuable. It scales really well, but you might have a reason to delay it a little bit in certain cases if you expect your micro to be able to take over a little bit in those early engagements. And so you can choose to get more economy by adding in a town center, and then just have to put in a little bit more effort into those early game trades when your opponent might have ballistics and you do not. And the final note I'll end on for this video is that the meta will always adapt, and players will always find new ways to go around existing strategies and existing mechanics. I feel like these days people are way too quick to call for a nerf or call for a change when something seems a little extravagant. Imagine this dodging ballistics was discovered today. So many people would be like, this has to be banned from the game. There's no way this is real. How is this not possible? That guy's clearly bug abusing. However, the reality is other players would just adapt to this newfound mechanic, and players will all get better based on the new findings and based on the new tricks and strategies that they'll come up with after years and years of practice. And for me, that's what makes AoE2 so interesting, the adaptation that we've seen over the years, and it's really refreshing to see something come in that's absolutely game breaking on paper, but ends up just being a natural part of the game that has actually enriched a lot of the strategies that we see today. That's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you guys did enjoy, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. If you guys want more content from me, check me out on Patreon for all my exclusive guides, rec reviews, secret discords where I answer questions 24/7, and a lot of other exclusive perks, of course, including the strategy guide. And check me out on Twitch for my live streams to come hang out and say what's up in the chat. We really want to see you guys on YouTube coming down to Twitch. Don't be shy. All right, that's it for me. Take care. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.